Well, Mr. Mike O'Neill, you were saying I might look a little tired. I'll fill you in on what's been going on. Last weekend, uh, for the record, I've been trying to get you on this thing for 10 months now.
Yes,
So for a retired man, you're awfully busy, sir.
yes.
How's that been going lately?
Pretty busy. I'm doing some remodeling. I've got a 24 by 24 great room that I think I sent you a pic. I'm redoing the ceiling and the walls with some Western cedar to give it more of a rustic cabin look. So, in fact, I was doing some moving around of materials before we I called in. But yeah, I stay busy with that. I do a little bobcat work. Um, I just finished a job for a neighbor, flattening out about 2,500 square foot, where she's going to put a house, shed, and a garage. So got that done. Yeah, cleaning up. We had a bad windstorm about a month ago, and I probably got 15, 20 trees down, and I'm cleaning up. So I got a lot of irons in the fire.
No rest for the wicked indeed. How long have you been
No,
retired?
July of 23. It's been a little over 2 years.
Okay. And what was your position that you vacated at that point?
At that point, I was on the slide out. I was manager of training, development, and I did a lot of clerical stuff. I okayed all the boat charters, which is probably 60 of them, either once or twice a month. So,
And that was for ACBL?
yes, it was.
Was your career, your whole career with them?
No, I worked, let's see, three places. I worked for Missouri River Barge Lines, which Valley ended up buying. Started there October of 78. And then I rolled that into going to work for Valley Line in 80 as a bill of lading clerk. Did a lot of cargo spreadsheets, kept track of different cargoes, and then we started a part lot business called Trans Golf, and I coordinated and I had to bill Valley Line from Trans Golf and do a lot of paperwork shuffle. And that was back when iron and steel, sugar, and one other commodity was regular rice was regulated commodity. You had to charge with the schedule showed.
Well, let's back up and start where it all began. We'll work your way or work our way into your career and then kind of through it. We'll see where it all goes. But these episodes usually begin with where were you born and what did your parents do? Sort of what was the
Okay.
family condition? What was the condition of the country at the time? Paint that picture for me.
All right. Let's see. I was born at the I'll throw this out there because it's interesting. I was born at Hotel Dew in New Orleans, which is actually a hospital. I think it was a hotel back in the 1800s. But anyway, born there. My parents lived with my mom's parents on Dauphine Street, right near the Uvic Pie Bakery. So grew up there. 62, we moved to Araby, first little town east of New Orleans. Let's see. My dad, let's see. I'm not quite sure what my dad was doing. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Got two brothers and a sister. Um, we lived in a two-bedroom, one bath house, which my dad later added on two more bedrooms and two more bass.
This is in Araby?
Yes, an Araby, yes.
And how old were you at this point?
Let's see. We moved there. I was 3, and then he added on in 72, about 10 years after we moved in. Yeah, so we lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood, parish. No crime to speak of at all. I started off in Catholic school, and back then they called it nursery. I guess it's preschool now. Nursery. And in kindergarten, first and second grade, I went to St. John Vianney was the name of the school. Then about that time, Hurricane Betsy hit 65. My dad was actually at that point, he was working for Valley Line. He started in 65, summer of 65. And in September when Betsy hit, he and about 3 other fellows were out on the fleet while Betsy hit. And they rode it out there until just about all the cargo barges or empties broke loose, and some of the spars were breaking loose. The river there at Valley Marrero runs almost due east-west. So the east winds preceding Betsy and northern quadrant were whipping up 10 to 12 foot seas in the river there. So it broke everything loose. They ended up jumping out and going over to the Celotex plant in Marrero, the place that makes the ceiling tiles and some insulated panels. So they spent the time there. So that was interesting. We got in a let's see, once the storm was over, we got in about a 16-foot Sears hull boat. Battery was dead, so my uncle and a friend of his pushed the boat up to dry land, which was St. Bernard Highway. Was the closer you got to the river, the shallower the water was until you hit dry land from 5 feet deep back where we were.
Who did you say your father worked for?
He started at Valley Line in 1965.
What was he doing for them?
He was a fleet superintendent back then. It was at Valley Line during that time period, there was no real, in the Gulf, there was no logistics. They had dispatchers, but operations pretty much ran the whole shebang. You had a regional operations manager, then a fleet superintendent. So he was a fleet superintendent, managed the the ties and the just the general well-being of the fleet, shore wires.
Was that your first experience, I guess, with the industry?
Well, before that, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, owned a tugboat company. Started in 1950. He was a test pilot for Higgins Shipyard during World War II. So he took out the PT boats, gave them trials, and checked their seaworthiness. So after he got that, he went and partnered with a brother-in-law of his and bought a model boat. Gosh, sorry, you heard that. So yeah, they bought a little model bow boat and started working that. He did some Gulf Coast stuff. He did get a job with NASA for a while. He and my uncle, his oldest son, used to tow a lot of rocket sections from Michoud up to Stennis, up the Pearl River. So my uncle still tells me stories about towing up the Pearl rocket section. Some of they were loaded up with fuel, and believe it or not, he said they used to have no security on the boat or the barge. Excuse me. So he said that was interesting compared to today.
Anything else especially memorable that he shared with you about those trips?
No, other than back in the day, oh, the vast majority of the time it was just him and my grandfather. And my grandfather used to take the sticks and run as long as he could, and then put my uncle, which was he was born in 45, so he was 12, 12, 13, 15 years old back in the late 50s, and he started running the boat. So he started off early.
Okay. Well, then let's walk through your life. Went through school. Did you do college?
Not initially. So when I got my driver's license at 16 back in the 70s, I started. My uncle at that time, my grandfather passed away in 62 on the boat, by the way. Yeah, they found him. He had been working. He worked really hard and long hours. Anyway, so when I got my driver's license at 16, I started doing crew change and getting groceries for boats, and going. My uncle's boats ran east at that time towards Port St. Joe. He was working for Central Gulf Lash back then. So he'd take lash barges. There was a paper mill in Apalachicola. He used to take pulp out there. So he used to take empties out and bring pulp back from somewhere. So I used to. I had my mind at that point on working on tugboats, being a captain. So I used to get a call and just skip school and go, drive over to Destin, Mobile, whatever, the crew changes. And anytime my dad at that time, well, let me back up a little bit. My dad left Valley Line in 72 or 73 due to a dispute with his the Gulf operations manager. But anyway, he actually started working with my uncle running boats. So anytime my uncle and my dad wanted to get off during a watch, while they were off, I would go pick them up either, bulk terminal near the industrial locks. So I had to stay pretty nimble about jumping in the car and going to get them. So anyway, let's see. All right, so I started doing that. And then during the summer in high school, I would do some decking. I would be like a trainee deck and steersman. So I was steering, decking as an extra person on the boat. So I learned a lot of operations earlier in my career by doing that. We even broke up at Petty Boy Pass one trip. So
Well, fill me in on your career journey then. You've already kind of touched on you did some deck work, ended up shoreside in a sort of a paperwork role.
in 78, all right, my dad went back to work for Valley Line as the Marine superintendent. The boss he had quit over, left, retired, whatever happened. So he got the job doing that. So he was the operations boss manager over the Gulf Coast for Valley Line. So he port captain. Let me back up. Missouri River Valley Line ran the big boats. Missouri River Barge Line, due to union things back then, they operated the tugs for Valley Line in the Gulf. It was two of them initially, and then five total. But my dad got me. Port captain had moved on, and I filled in for port captain starting in October of '78. 4 boats. So started doing that. Let me back up just a second. When my dad worked at Valley the second time, he ended up putting in. He put all the dead men in and all the dolphins and shore wires at Armont. He basically put Armont together back in the mid-'70s. So
Was that you said
anyway,
who was?
my dad did.
Okay.
Yeah. So
When did he retire? How old was he?
he retired a little early. ACBL kind of nudged him out in 2001. He was 62, and he went to work. He went to work for Adams Land and Marine. So he got to 65. He worked at Adams Land for a while. Let's see. I've got let me jump back to his career. So he worked at Valley Line. In the mid '80s, Valley Line let go their, he retired their VP of operations, a guy named Bus Beaver in St. Louis. So they offered my dad that job. So he went to St. Louis. He was VP of operations for a while in Valley, St. Louis. So about 2 years into that, J. Russell Flowers at the time was interim president, CEO of Valley Line. And he ended up hiring Bill Robertson to be another VP of operations. And that didn't sit well with my dad, so he quit Valley a second time at that point, because there were going to be no compatibility between him and Bill. So he quit. About a year later, he got on with National Marine. He was the fleet superintendent, manager of Tiger Fleet. So he worked up in Baton Rouge from late '80s till about 90 or 91, and then he was promoted to VP of operations at National in New Orleans. So, and then when ACBL bought National in '98, he came over from '98 to '01. It's just kind of I don't know, they didn't have a place for him, really. So he helped all he could, but then he got squeezed out. So anyway, that's him. So let's see. So he got me on that Valley Line. When Valley Line bought Flowers Transportation in '81, I went from the clerk job I had, the freight clerk, to a fleet manager, fleet dispatcher job. Actually, a guy named Cliff Mosby came over from Flowers, and he only stayed about 6 or 8 months, and then he left. And I took his spot as dispatcher. So I did that for dispatched 3 fleets at that time: Armont, the old Flowers, what they call a Triangle St. Rose. You had Flowers, Nilo, and Dervaux Meckling were the 3 partners there at Triangle St. Rose. So dispatch that and dispatch Valley Marrero. So
I assume that's where Triangle is now.
well, now you've got Triangle. That's Artco's fleet now. That's Flowers Artco.
Down
It's
around.
113.
Okay, right.
And then Federal started the Triangle up in reserve.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure of the partners. I never did gain access to why it was called Federal back in the Jeff Kendall days. Jeff was running Triangle up there in the late 70s and 80s. So let's see. So I'm at Valley. Yeah, we did all the ship sides for Marrero. So back then there was a lot of Japanese steel coming in. So we would work anywhere from 3 to 6 ships, riverfront. Some had 2 rigs, some had single rigs. So it was a hectic job. It was a 12-hour job. Stayed busy. Valley at the time in 81, and Valley bought Flowers and built 240 barges in 1981. So Valley got up to about 1,300 barges at that time. So, and it would be another 10 years before they built another 100. But, sorry, Amos is getting in front of the camera.
No problem. I've got 3 of the 4 dogs in here looking at me, begging for dinner an hour early. But
let's see. So
wait, fill me in. The very first company you said, Missouri Barge Line, that you worked for?
Missouri River Barge Line.
Fill me in on their history.
All right. They either bought or leased. There was an old grain company on the Missouri River called Bartlett Company. They had BC barges, old barges built. It was steel lifts built in probably late 50s, early 60s. So Missouri River Barge had, I want to say 50 barges, and they had, I want to say it was just 2 boats. I want to say it was a Belzoni and Vicksburg. So, yeah, they ran their 2 boats from Kansas City to St. Louis. In fact, there's a fella that still works for ACBL that just made 50 years a couple of years ago that worked for Missouri River, Greg Smith. He's got a boat named after him. So I met Greg, his dad, and his brother, Charlie, came down to run one of the tugs at Armont during the winter when they couldn't run the Missouri when the flows were cut off. So I met Greg 79, I believe it was, his dad, and he's still out there running. So let's see, Missouri River, and then Valley bought.
He's still out there running, you said?
Oh yeah.
50 years later?
Yeah, in fact, he should be 52 by now.
Okay.
There was a celebration I was still working for ACBL. It was him, Greg, and Mike. I'm not going to remember his name. It was 2 gentlemen, pilots, captains at ACBL that had 50 years of service back in 2023. So,
Well,
yeah, Missouri River, man.
I was going to say, yeah, fill me in on your career sort of job transition. So Missouri River to Valley Line acquiring, and then what happened next?
All right. I was fleet manager at Marrero until 1986. Then
And which fleet is that now? Is that Cooper Marrero?
it's Cooper now. Yes.
Okay. All right.
It's Cooper. Yeah. It was sold. It was sold off because the company wasn't doing that well at one point. Sold it to Cooper. But anyway, good. It's a good fleet. Fairly slack water. You got an upstream eddy at the head of the fleet. The bank's pretty steep, so you don't have the barges running in and out as much with a steeper bank. Anyway, let's see. So yeah, I did that. Then I got promoted in '86 to assistant operations manager. So the scope of that was both operations and logistics. So I started writing northbound tows and designing northbound tow diagrams in '86. That would have been like February '86. So we were.
For the record, I was not on Earth yet.
Yeah, I hear you. Let's see. Back then, we started during the mid '80s. We started trying to turn out boats at Armand, and then shuttle down, or whatever you want to call it, redeliver barges to Marrero, and not bring the big boats all the way down to Marrero. With limited success, depending on fleet space and boat spacing. So let's see, '86, I took over that. '87 is when we actually closed the office at Marrero. So we sent the whatever salespeople we had, other traffic support people. We had we got an office, regular office, and we moved to Armand. Back then, the office, I skipped over that. The office at Marrero was an old steam shaft-driven boat, the steam vessel, New Orleans. So it was an interesting. I guess it was built in the '30s.
Where is it now? Do you know?
Went up the Arkansas River, and I don't know if it's still floating or not.
Okay.
But yeah, it was
still from the '30s.
Yeah, it was a riveted hull boat. So it still had the two boilers were laid over in the engine room. Still had the bricks. The bricks kind of broke all apart. Yeah, it had a brick boiler engine rooms. So it was interesting. And going back, I used to go when my dad worked at Valley Line in the '60s. They had a rope hanging in the engine room, and as kids, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, we used to swing across the engine room on a rope in the office. So much for safety.
Yeah, nothing's changed since then.
But anyway, I can remember. I'm going to jump back and forth. I can remember in '73 the big flood. At the Marrero fleet, they had built a walkway from the base of the levee to the boat because the parking lot stayed flooded, I think, for 6 or 7 months. That was pretty big area. Anyway, all right. So '87, closed that office. We moved up to Armand. Up there, the office boat was the motor vessel Louisiana. That boat came out probably in the '40s. It was believe it or not, it was one of those experimental diesel electric. So it came out diesel generators, and then the generators powered motors that spun the wheels. Now, before it was retired, it was converted over to straight diesel. But yeah, that's what we had in Louisiana. So yeah, I was let's see, I was we were in the wheelhouse of Louisiana for a while. Dispatch. I was still a Marine superintendent or assistant, excuse me, still doing writing tows. Plus, I used to walk the fleet, ride the fleet boats a lot, take short trips earlier in the day when I could, down to probably Gramercy, up to Convent, stuff like that. Just to ride and talk with the captains and pilots.
And how did those connections you made in those wheelhouses or on those boats carry forward with you through the years in your career?
Oh, I I generally had an understanding of what's going on the boats, and I always considered the operation, of the boats and just the fleet moving barges around, moving tow. During for a lot of decisions, I always did an operational feasibility prior to formulating a logistics plan. So, yeah, I never put the cart before the horse, really, unless it was unavoidable due to congestion or bunching boats. But yeah,
Well, I don't know if I'm jumping forward here, but Marrero Fleet was kind of where we left off. When was the acquisition or building of Harahan Fleet?
go way back now. I went to Harahan when ACBL bought Valley Line in '92. We transitioned. The old personnel went out, and the Valley Line people were incorporated right as Hurricane Andrew hit South Louisiana. That was the Labor Day weekend, '92. So anyway, yeah. So I went to Harahan, worked for Jim Fox. Jim Fox was back then it was AVP of logistics. Sonny Ivey was the VP of operations back in '92. So, Harahan is actually a lease from Wood Resources. All that land is leased from Wood. There's sand pits from the UEP Long Bridge up all the way to almost the golf course there, whatever the golf course is in Harahan on the river. So,
Tell me about working for Jim Fox and Sonny Ivey. I've had Jim on the show, and I think I'm going to
yeah,
again here shortly. But I know, of course, Sonny Ivey we've lost to
yeah.
antiquity to some degree. But tell me about him. Uh, was was he already? What position did you say he was?
Sonny.
Yes.
Sonny was VP of operations Gulf Coast.
Well, what do you know of his life and career?
Let's see. Not. I didn't talk to him a whole lot. I talked to him on I don't know, probably weekly basis. Didn't attend any meetings with him. He obviously, he was a skipper. He was a captain. I want to say he got off the boats and went to Harahan probably in the early to mid '70s. First time I actually talked to him, I was with Valley Line. I called him to do a wage survey, probably 1979. I didn't get much out of him actually. He didn't know who I was, but anyway, but he was kind of a gruff old tough operations person. Kind of an old school operations person. He stayed in touch. I think mainly he helped manage the personnel on the. At that time, ACBL had turnboats. We had 3 turnboats in the Gulf. We used to. It was 2 6,000 and a 5,600 that used to turn the 8,400s near Baton Rouge, or that was the plan. So Sonny was, he didn't. I talked to him most of the time. He was a smoker, so we would talk in the smoke room sometimes. And then every now and then, when our paths crossed before lunch, I'd go out to lunch with him. He loved the poker machines too. So, yeah, we used to go to that there's a old restaurant on River Road there near the Huey Long Bridge. I can't think of the name of it.
I know what
But
you're talking about. I've eaten there, but I can't name
it's
it
got
either.
the old wooden floors and
Yep.
yeah. Anyway, but yeah. Let's see, Sonny. Yeah, and he managed, a lot of the. If they had any political issues, Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, Sonny would handle that. And with his tenure back then, he was pretty effective working with. He always obligated us ACBL to do the bridge pier inspections for the Huey Long. So they'd have about 8 to 10. I don't know if they were Corps, other transportation people that would come out and get a boat ride and go spin around the piers just to see physically if they look good. I remember us doing that. Let's see, what else about Sonny? He was overall just a real knowledgeable person.
How about old Jim Fox?
Jim was one of the better people I worked for. Real comprehensive. He stayed pretty much, kept his finger on the pulse of what was going on logistically and sales wise. Let's see, I worked with him September of '92, and then he went to, I'm sure he went to Venezuela, I guess in the summer of '96. It was. We had started up a new business down there. He went down there. Let's see, but yeah, Jim was great to work with. Plus, he used to sometimes take me to football games. We had some tickets to go to football game with Jim, and Sandra back then, wife and I. And he took my son, '94, took my son to, saw Pink Floyd in the Dome with the ACBL tickets, which was pretty good time. Let's see, Jim. Jim, just nothing but praise for him. He's a real good guy. Treated me real well, and returned the favor.
Well, where did your career take you from there?
Well, let's see. I still had a lot of ambition in me. Let's see, I was 96. I was 35 for the most part, 36 late in the year. No, 38 late, excuse me. 37, 38. So I put in officially to take Jim's spot, which I might have been experienced enough for it. Anyway, I went for it and didn't get it. And here, I'll throw this name in. Neither did, at that time, Patrick Morton, a gentleman I think you know. He was a Lower Miss Gulf Coast system planner in Jeffersonville, ACBL. And he thought he could do the job, and he intended on trying to get that job. And they ended up hiring a guy with a JD that didn't practice law. So they hired basically somebody that, and I liked the guy, but he didn't have any experience. So I guess he had a lot of sheepskin and, looked good on paper. But yeah, and he was a nice guy, but he just hired him for those reasons. And so the chain of events started then. Patrick was disgruntled. I was a little disgruntled. And so Patrick left ACBL in '97, early '97, to go to work for IC Rail in Conway. It was starting up back then. I guess it might have been iron ore or some kind of bulk rail line terminal. So when Patrick left, there was a gentleman I worked with. He was my customer at Valley Line. Kind of left this off. Valley Line in the 80s did all of the altar barge lines. We landed their tows and distributed their barges and got them back in the fleet and turned their boats out. So we were doing altars and Conti carriers. We were doing the Conti carriers business from, they would drop the barges at Armont and we would deliver between Reserve and Darrow, return them to our fleet. And pretty consistently, Conti would always pick up 13 empties. They would leave, back in those days, they'd leave Carrollton with 15 loads, pick up 13 empties at Armont. So there was a gentleman working at Conti Carriers named Jim Farley. So Jim came down for a contract negotiation one year in Valley, probably 80, 88. And he had a list of little grievances and issues. Well, gentleman I worked with at Valley, I didn't mention his name, but he retired from Marquette. He was Tom Fisher. You ever heard his name? He's passed away now. Lost his soul.
I didn't know. That was recent, huh? I'd spoken with him just a few years ago.
It was, let's see. Yeah, I talked to him. Yeah, it would have been, I guess it's almost a year now. No, it might have been this spring. Anyway, Tom and I kept meticulous records at Valley, all our times, operational things, communications. So Jim Farley came down for the meeting and, went through this boat, this happened with this boat, and we think that was excessive time at Armont. Well, we took out our paperwork and said, well, the boat did this and this. We, extracted 6 barges from the boat, but we put together, rebuilt the tow and basically moved 20 other barges. So if you take the total barges extracted and moved, the times are not bad. So actually impressed Jim so much. Now, there could have been other things, but within 6 months, he had left Conti and he was working for Valley Line in St. Louis. So Jim went to ACBL from Valley Line in 92. He went to Jeffersonville. He was the VP of logistics. So when Patrick left, I had a good relationship with him. In fact, Jim kept close track of what happened. And we at Armont, we screwed up a rigging exchange one time. We had a boat come in, tie his tow off, and he was going to lay out. Crew was going to switch to another boat. So we didn't do any type of rigging exchange prior. We should have took the rigging. I won't go into it, but we didn't do any rigging work before. Well, when Jim saw the log the next day and saw where we spent probably an hour and a half exchanging rigging between the laid up boat and the boat that was going to lay it up, he called me and gave me a little ass chewing for that. So that's how close our VP of Op was involved in what was going on. Anyway, while Jim was at ACBL in Jeffersonville, he hired me to replace Patrick Morton in Jeffersonville. And that's when I moved up. That was in 1997, spring of 97. Back then, we called them that level. It was between a manager and maybe a director. It was called a system planner, which basically did all the boat and barge logistics for the Ohio River. I did the lower and Gulf Coast.
Well, did you know Ed William?
Yeah, I knew that well. Yes. Yes.
I've got dogs in here making noise. There's a neighbor walking a dog, but no, after ACBL acquired AEP, when I joined them,
Yeah.
Ed was big dog at night, and
Yeah.
my first assignment with them was dispatching Harahan and Dockside
Yeah. Remember.
overnight. So, where were you at that time of the acquisition?
I was in Jeffersonville
And
that
and what
time.
role? Because I heard your name
Oh
over
yeah.
those years.
I was kind of macro logistics manager over the Gulf Coast, West Canal, in Gulf area. So now after the transition, we went to I never was a big fan of it. We went to a boat and barge split within logistics. So we had some people that were interested in just boats, boat orders, boat plans, all this stuff, and other people just did barges. Well, I was relegated to a barge person, which was a pretty frustrating time in my career. And Will Hart was named the boat manager in the Gulf Coast. So, but that might sound good on the surface, so people can concentrate, I guess, on certain aspects of business, but it created a lot of conflicts of interest. Unintended, but that was the net result, a lot of conflicts of interest. So it didn't take long. Let's see, it took about 2 years, I guess, for that to play out. And then we went back to people managing boat and barges. So you had a balance struck between boat efficiency and barge movement. So, yeah.
Well, fill me in on the rest of the ride, I guess.
Let's see. All right. Let me go back. Let me go back to 98. 98, after the National Marine acquisition merger, actually, the parent company, National Marine, bought ACBL. Wasn't the other way around. But ACBL ended up the big dog, and National ended up the tail in the deal. So, um, so what that did for ACBL in 98, National ACBL had 50, 60 tank barges prior to that. After that, it was about 350, I believe, if my memory serves me. So, and just prior to that, I want to say it was 94, 95, ACBL acquired Heinz America, which is now HFL, Heinz Furlong, Kent, the grandson's business. Anyway, the old Heinz America, they had about 35, 40 all oversized tank barges and I think 4 boats. And what they had a program. It wasn't a unit tow. It was like a hybrid. There was 3 customers involved, and they would run basically a locking size tow. They were 108 foot wide by 1,000 foot long, with oversized barges from the Gulf to the upper Pittsburgh area, Parkersburg. So Jim Farley, being the person he is, and now with this extra equipment, we started what we called a through tow liquid tow out of the Gulf. So we would sail 3 to 5 boats a week with mostly tankers. Usually it had to be 80% tankers for us to reduce this tow size from normal down to 15, the equivalent of a locking tow. So we would send mostly Ohio tows and some Illinois River tows out of the Gulf. And it sped up the round trip on the tank barges by, it reduced it by about 33% on these barges. So as long as the work was there and we could reload the barges quick enough, it ended up being a really successful program, which kind of ended in '08 when we had the big crash, financial market crash and all that stuff. So that went on for almost 10 years. Let's see. And I managed that, being the Gulf area person. So yeah, I would actually manage that whole thing on top of everything else.
Well, tell me more about that. I've been in liquids dispatch for it would be 2 years and a couple of months here.
Cool.
Um, Fascinatingly different world from what I knew in dry.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
we had an expedited tow program similar to what you're talking about, and I've heard an array of things about it. But what was it from your perspective? How was that program running,
Well,
and how frequently were you able to keep it at that 80% level?
it was. I mean, we'd have the occasional boat that went probably closer to 60, but we wouldn't allow that to happen a whole lot. We would switch, and it was mostly the boats that Dave Dewey operated. It was the Dave Dewey boats, which he operated for National Marine, which he kept operating for ACBL for a period of time, and the Hines boats, the James G. Hines. And I think back then they had the Sunflower. So, so it was about 10 boats, and what we would do, the logistics on it, we would match up. We have to match up barges coming off the West Canal to Baton Rouge with loadings at Geismar, uh, Chevron there at Donaldsonville, Taft, and a few down at Chalmette. So we would pick a boat, or, pick a timing. And for the most part, we will focus more on getting barges moved quicker than boat efficiency. So a lot of times the boats would come down as far as Harahan with maybe, um, maybe 3 or 4 barges, and then turn around with light tows. I think our average pickup, for the most part, was under 2 days on all 10 barges in the Gulf. And what we would do if the availability that wasn't there for the class of boat, we would switch to like a lighter tow. We'd go with, say, 4 dry cargo loads and 20 empties, and let that boat go if there wasn't any tankers. And then by contrast, if there was a gap, we started making barges. We would shuttle up barges from the lower harbor with a boat and consolidate everything at Baton Rouge. Turn the through tow boat at Baton Rouge, and then shuttle the what we call the overage down to the lower harbor. So that all worked fairly well. I don't want to say the boat spent 24 hours in the Gulf rounding up the tow, but once they left, they could go. A lot of times, tows leaving the Gulf, they could have a Paducah drop, but most of them went all the way to Owensboro before they did their first drop out of the Gulf. Went through Cairo and had their tow belt for locking rivers. So tows were fast. And I'll tell you an interesting story. Some of the captains started voicing some concern about not having empties on the head of the tow. Said, "Oh well, we've got to slow down, coming up on these points, because once we get in upstream eddy or slack water, we speed up to say 7, and when we hit the current above the point, the front end dives. So we lose a lot of time slowing down." Well, back then, we had a poor captain working at Harrihan, special projects and the help logistic guy named Chris Prim. And so he and I worked on an experiment to give some boats head covers and other boats not head covers in the same time period to get the river conditions the same, kind of the whole deal. Well, it turns out the boats without head covers made better time. So that goes to show captains sometimes. This is not a criticism, but sometimes they get a notion that something's not working well, but actually, might not be. Their assertion might be well intended, but not actually true. So, now on the flip side, the first time I used to see boats on the canal, mostly shoving box empties on the head of the tow. I used to kind of throw a fit and call them and say, "Look, you got to shove the rake empties, on the head of the tow, make better time." They say, "Well, look, you don't having these box empties on the head of the tow allows me to have a lot more control. The tow slides a lot less. I'm able to steer a lot of stuff and not have to watch the slide." They said it works better. I still didn't believe them for the most part, and I called my uncle, Wayne Sanborne, the guy that been working on boats forever. And he said, he said the captain's right. He said, my uncle at one time, while he still owned boats, he was a port captain for Farley Marine. Farley was doing the oversized SJT barges. They used to run two-piece units from the river over to there was a coal plant on the West Canal, Port St. Joe, I believe it was. But anyway, so they tried an experiment one time, coming back from the coal plant. Same time, two boats were in the area. So one took with the box on the head of the tow, the other took the rake, and sure enough, the guy with the box beat the other boat by a little bit. So shoving the box empty on the head through experimentation doesn't necessarily hurt.
Well, how hellacious was VTS in Morgan City at that point?
Yes.
How hellacious was that? Because until recently, during high water, they would not let even box empties on the head come through there in a certain configuration.
Yeah. I never was involved in a situation with the Coast Guard with empties, to be honest with you. So I don't have a frame of reference. We don't. Wish I did, but no.
It was an interesting time. I dispatched the West Canal both canals, west and east, Mobile to Brownsville, essentially. Um, and learning about all that stuff and how all that works. I mean, I got fairly heavily involved with VTS Morgan City for a time there, and actually powered up three of the boats that were running back there just so they would not have to sit and wait all night for an assist boat, to get through there.
Yes.
Basis, horsepower and tow configuration. So it was a huge learning opportunity for me that I'm actually back on canals now for liquids. So yeah, where did your career take you from there, or do you feel like you've kind of covered as much as today as we should?
Yeah. I think we could pick up part two here
Sure.
at another time. Yeah, I've got a load more stuff in my brain here.
Okay. Well,
Just struggling a little bit with continuity, but other than that, it's
that's
all
no
there.
that's no problem. I appreciate the time this evening, but
Well,
as of right now, my alma mater is playing LSU at
yeah,
Tiger Stadium, so
yeah,
I think I'm going to go take a look at that for a while. I do appreciate your time, sir. This will probably publish, let me see. I'm hoping early November, election day, in fact. How about that?
good for me.
All right, sir.
Great. Have a
Thanks
good
very
evening.
much. Talk to you later.
Go Tigers.
Indeed.